Support for Alabama Aloud comes from Ernest and Hadley Booksellers of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who strive to provide a unique selection of new, used, and rare books from local, regional, and international sources. Information about online orders at ernestandhadleybooks.com.
From Troy Public Radio, this is Alabama Aloud. I'm Don Noble. Alabama Aloud is the only podcast where you can hear Alabama stories read in their entirety. Today, I'll be reading two stories by Tom Franklin, Safety Man and My Wife's Good-Looking Friends. Tom Franklin, raised in Clark County, Alabama, is best known for rough, dark fiction, especially the story collection Poachers and his novels such as Hell at the Breach, Smunk, Crooked Letter, and The Tilted World, which he co-wrote with his wife, Beth Ann Fennelly. Tom Franklin can also be quite funny, but not surprisingly, his is a wry, dark humor. Safety Man was published in the collection A State of Laughter, Comic Fiction from Alabama, edited by Don Noble, and is read here by permission of the author. After his second affair, when his second wife left him for the third time, the first thing Gary did was start drinking. The next thing he did was to find an ad in the classifieds and pay a $12 sign-up fee. But unlike the other members of the Victims of Abuse Spouses group, he felt ready to dive right back into the singles scene. The other members, all women, sobbed in the church basement where they met each Thursday night. Sometimes they threw up. They said they needed time to heal, to be alone. Gary hit on them all. He had a tableside lamp that turned on when you clapped your hands. Gary and a paralegal were under a comforter struggling. When she slapped him, the light came on. She jumped up, and looking around for her purse, she said, You're... But she found her purse and ran out and never told him. What was he? He got a mongrel dog at one of those adopt-a-pet sidewalk fairs. It wanted to be walked all the time and ate the feces of other dogs, which Gary took as low self-esteem. Also, the dog barked almost exclusively at Asian Americans. Gary had a theory that a cruel Japanese or Chinese man, or a Korean, had abused the dog. But why should he, Gary, deal with some Vietnamese dude's screwed-up ex-pet? He had enough on his plate to deal with, and eventually left the dog bungee-corded to a light pole in front of the animal shelter. He sat in his car down the street, wearing a baseball cap, pretending to read a newspaper, until a chubby woman came out, looked around, and led the dog back inside. In the same week, there was an incident at work where he was the safety man at a large chemical plant. It made pesticides. Gary was in charge of seeing that no one got killed or hurt. He drove a yellow pickup with a clip-on siren and could often be seen updating the large poster in the plant cafeteria that said how many safe man-hours there had been. At present, the figure was very high, 10,668, just 87 hours from the record held by Gary's predecessor. If he could break the record, that might mean a raise or promotion. The incident at his job was this. He showed up for work hungover and unshaven. One of his chief responsibilities was to make sure everyone's gas mask fit tightly in case of a chemical leak, an alarm sounded, and you fastened your mask onto your face. So it was of major concern that Gary's 3-day thick growth of beard might cause an imperfect seal in his mask. Imperfect seals were a pet peeve of Gary's, as everyone knew, including Elroy, the big black rent-a-cop, who refused to let the safety man on sight with his fuzz. Gary said, "Bug off," and a shoving match ensued, and Elroy had Gary in a headlock when a golf cart skidded to a stop, and the plant manager, dressed in a tie and hard hat, tried to get to the bottom of things. First, he sent the uniformed onlookers back to their stations. Pesticides could not make themselves. Then he made Elroy let Gary up and called the medic to check out Gary's head injury. "It might be a concussion," somebody said. "Look in his eyes. Get a flashlight." "I feel fine," Gary said, batting their hands away. A line of blood ran down his nose, and he let it drip onto his white shirt. "Should we warm up the helicopter?" asked the pilot. "No," the plant manager said. He stood and folded his arms. "Take him in the Chrysler." At the emergency room, they sprayed the gash on his head and bandaged him up and gave him a prescription for pain pills that he later took with alcohol, though the label advised against it. When he called the plant manager's office, the plant manager's secretary told him he was to stay home for a week without pay. He was officially reprimanded. A letter was being drafted as they spoke. And in case he was wondering, the secretary herself had demoted the safe man hours figure to 0. He hung up. In the lonely rooms of his rental unit, he realized how much he'd been relying on his job for stability, though it gave him small daily targets. Get up at 6 a.m., turn on the Mr. Coffee, drive to the plant, clock in, take his clipboard from its nail and start his rounds. At the end of his shift, clock out, charge a 12-pack at the gas and go, drive home. What would he do now? Except for beer, the refrigerator was empty. His cable had been turned off because he'd forgotten to pay the bill, so he drank and watched the television snow until he noticed the time. At Abusive Spouses, the women confronted him despite his bandaged head. They'd voted him out of the group. "You're an abuser," they said, "not a victim. We've called your ex-wife." "Which one?" he asked. "Get out," they said. Sitting here in his car underneath magnolia branches, beside a cemetery full of dead strangers, he got out and urinated between a husband and wife pair of graves. He looked at his wristwatch with a plan on his face. It would still be open. He would drive to the animal shelter and spring his dog. When he got there and double-parked, the clerk snapped her gum and told him somebody else had claimed it. "That happens once in a while," she said. "No!" Gary shouted. He suspected the dog was about to be euthanized, and strapping on his gas mask, he pushed through a flapping metal door and past the janitor in rubber boots and headphones. The room seemed foggy, and every dog stood up, barking. He went cage to cage, but his dog wasn't there. He removed his mask and apologized to the janitor, who ignored him. Maybe all life really was suffering, and what counted most was how well you did it. He walked back through the door and past the clerk dialing the police. All the way home, he drove too fast and kept changing the radio. He thought of his first marriage. So many memorable moments. Like after they got cable. Man, there used to be some really good shows. And now, My Wife's Good-Looking Friends by Tom Franklin. This short comic piece, My Wife's Good-Looking Friends, should not necessarily be read as autobiographical. My Wife's Good-Looking Friends is included in Franklin's forthcoming collection of short stories, Dead Towns of Alabama, and is read here by permission of the author. We are Southerners at the beach in Indiana, which I didn't even know had beaches, and on clear days, across the gray-green lake, you can see a tiny outline of Chicago, as if somebody sketched it in pencil. It's a private beach, like they all are now. 50 yards of prime white sand and a posse of chairs, rafts, and umbrellas. It came with the rented house of my wife's good-looking friends, who vacation here each July. Once in a while, like now, on the way from Alabama to visit my wife's other friends in Chicago, we'll stop. I don't like to visit my wife's good-looking friends because I am not good-looking. Everybody says so without quite saying so. How'd you get her to marry you? You must be rich. My wife is good-looking herself and fits in among her good-looking friends here on the beach, all of them in bikinis and Speedos and with dunes and sawgrass and everybody's phone up. But put me in the pictures, and I'm this bearded thug who wandered in from some dark alley. When I offer to take the group shot, everybody smiles brighter. I prefer my wife's ugly friends. They're from a different period in her life, rehab or grad school. They're the ones in Chicago. They're all fat, and their duplex has the AC full blast, and there are trays of food everywhere, and they never stop eating. The men are balding and red in the face, and sometimes the women's feet swell, and they can't wear shoes. When we visit, I stand outside by the giant grill, holding my Bud Light, and I feel like the skinniest, best-looking guy in the city. Still got all my teeth and a head of fulsome hair stirring in the beefy smoke. I wonder if my wife's good-looking friends have better-looking friends in some state better than Indiana. Conversely, do my wife's ugly friends in their ugly state have uglier friends yet? Think Oklahoma City or Biloxi, Mississippi. Think scars and birth defects, amputations. By now, all the good-looking people have folded their chairs and taken their phones up to the house, and I sit watching the sky darken and the water begin to chop. Then my wife texts that it's time to come in to dinner. They've ordered pizza from the good place. I gather my IPA beer and damp towel and stand and squint out at where the Chicago skyline used to be. There are plenty of dark alleys in that city where I could disappear, lurking with my thoughts and flaws, my good-looking wife safe across the water with all her good-looking friends. We hope you don't keep Alabama Aloud all to yourself. Subscribe to our podcast and share it with a friend. Better yet, write us a review in the iTunes store. It helps other people find the podcast. Alabama Aloud is a production of Troy Public Radio and produced by Austin Toy and Kyle Gassett. Special thanks to Matt Clower, Buddy Johnson, Michelle Mowry, and Jennifer Horn. Alabama Aloud is made possible in part by a grant from the Alabama State Council on the Arts. So, until next time, when you'll hear more of Alabama Read Aloud, I'm Don Noble. Thanks for listening.